Okay, we are now on the fourth part of Parallelograms and Their Friends quiz. These are the true or false questions. 14 through 18 are true or false questions. These are tests of whether you understand the properties or the relationships. The first two tests for the relationships. All squares are rectangles. And remember, a square has all of the properties of a rectangle and a rhombus. So a square, or any square, is a rectangle. So that's true. The reverse is not true. If you can find one example where the rectangle is not a square, just draw one. See if you can think of one example where the rectangle is not a square. This is a rectangle, or at least it looks like one. But it's not a square, therefore it's false. 16. All quadrilaterals are parallelograms. Again, see if you can find a counterexample. Draw a quadrilateral that doesn't look like a parallelogram. Well, quadrilateral only requirement is it has four sides. Look, what is that, Star Trek symbol? Something like that. It could be a concave quadrilateral. If you don't know what concave is, don't worry about it. But the idea is, this does not look like a parallelogram. This has no hope of being a parallelogram. So, this is false. 17 and 18 is testing your understanding of the properties. It says the diagonals of a rhombus are congruent. In a rhombus, the diagonals are perpendicular. The diagonals bisect their angles, but they are not congruent to each other. So false. 18. Diagonals of a rectangle are bisected by their diagonals. That is a property of rhombus. In a rectangle, the angles are not bisected. Right? This is saying that in a rectangle, these angles are congruent, but they are not congruent. So, false. Now I'm going to do question 19. Alright, here. Opposite sides are parallel. Okay, this is a chart where you put a check mark where if the shape has the property, you put a check on it. So I'm going to go shape by shape. Opposite sides are parallel. Parallelogram. Opposite sides are parallel. That's basically the definition. Diagonals are congruent. That doesn't happen for parallelogram. Opposite angles are congruent. That's a property for parallelograms. Diagonals are perpendicular. Nope. Consecutive angles are supplementary. There we go. Diagonals bisect each other. Yes. Equilateral. No. Okay. So those four are four of the 5 properties of a parallelogram. Now remember, rectangle, rhombus, and square, all of these are parallelograms. So if it's true for a parallelogram, it's true for a rectangle, rhombus, and a square. So I'm just going to put a check all the way across, simply because if it's a property for a parallelogram, it's a property for all of them. Now, let's check the other ones. I'm doing a rectangle. Diagonals are congruent. Well, in a rectangle, that's one of the key properties. Diagonals are perpendicular. That's not true for a rectangle. Equilateral. Rectangles are not equilateral. Okay. Now, remember, a square is also a rectangle. So if it's a property for a rectangle, it's going to be a property for a square. Now let's check out the rhombus. Rhombus. Diagonals are congruent. No. Diagonals are not congruent. Rhombus. Opposite. Okay. Diagonals are perpendicular. That's the key. That's one of the key features of a rhombus. Diagonals are perpendicular. And the last one, rhombus, is equilateral. That's part of the definition of a rhombus, that it is equilateral. And recall again, a square is a rhombus. So if it's a property of a rhombus, it's a property of a square. Property of a rhombus, property of a square. That's it. Now I'm going to save problem 20 for the next video segment.